Okay, so the title of our presentation is Creativity. Okay, so who here has heard of John Cleese? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, you know he was part of the Monty Python and he created that. He was a great actor. He gave a speech on the Cannes International Festival of Creativity. His speech about creativity pointed out a pretty funny story about him and his colleague. And they actually wrote a sketch for his show Monty Python. But he considered that the best sketch he had ever written. But the problem was that the morning when they went to the studio, they lost it. So his partner said, "Do you have it?" And John Cleese said, "Well, I don't. What are we going to do?" We're not going to do anything. But then John Cleese said, "Okay, I'll write the sketch from scratch." So he actually started writing the sketch from memory all over again. And he actually finished it. But the sketch turned out to be better than the original one he had written. What was this? He made a sketch in a hurry and it turned out to be better than the one he had spent all night long the day before. What was this one better? So he came up with the conclusion that it was probably his unconscious side of the mind. Ever since he had finished writing that first sketch, his mind had been thinking about how he could perfect it and make it better. But what is this unconscious mind, you may ask? Okay, so the first one that actually asked this question was Sigmund Freud. He was a pioneer of psychology and psychoanalysis. Also, his hypothesis about the unconscious side of the mind is that it was mostly filled only with ideas of sex and aggression. Although I know I'm not aggressive in the inside. I'm pretty comfortable with my personality. But many professionals of his time said that he was crazy. But then later on, in other times, there was another man called Leonard Mlodinow, and he came up with a book, which was also controversial. It was called Sublime. And he actually did more studies than Dr. Freud. And he said that the unconscious side of the mind is in charge of color, shape, movement, and perspective, which are things that we actually experience every day, but we don't really notice. That is part of the conscious mind. And there was another doctor called Dr. David Eagleman. And this young doctor came up with another conclusion. He said that the unconscious side of the mind is actually responsible for how we play a musical instrument, how we drive, also sports. But then again, there's still some questions. What can we do with this unconscious side of the mind? Can we even control it? So I looked up research when I was doing this presentation, and I came up with a study from Catherine Rowe, Dr. Catherine Rowe. She's from the University of Washington in St. Louis, and she was doing research on Alzheimer's disease. And her research team came up with a hypothesis called the cognitive reserve hypothesis. And they said the more cognitive abilities you have, which include critical thinking, memorization abilities, stuff like that, it will actually make the mind stronger and healthier. It's like training a muscle. So they figured out the people that have better and more cognitive abilities, that actually practice them more, actually had a healthier mind and they had less chance of getting Alzheimer's disease. So let me just give a little story. You may be wondering about the conscious side of the mind and the unconscious side of the mind. And Dr. Sigmund Freud, he used an iceberg as an example. You see the little top, the little piece that you can actually see that is not beneath the water? That is the conscious side of the mind. That's about 10%. Then other 90% is unconscious mind, which we barely don't even notice that we use. And so, also Dr. Eagleman came up with another theory. He compared two sides of thinking, convergent and divergent. Convergent is when a professor asks you a question and he only expects one answer. But convergent is what people must actually push. Divergent thinking is when you ask a question, you actually ask for various answers. It forces the person to be creative. And this thing called creativity, in the study made by Dr. Catherine Rowe, she said that creativity was actually the most important of all the cognitive abilities. And my partner was explaining how we can actually use creativity to our advantage.
Before I do actually talk about how to apply it to education, I want to tell you about an experiment that they did in London a couple of years back, where they tested where they took MRI scans of several cabbie drivers and bus drivers to see what the difference was between the two brains. And they found that there was a significant difference between the two, actually. The cabbie driver had actually a larger amount of gray matter in his brain as opposed to the bus driver. But what exactly is gray matter exactly? Well, gray matter is a part of the brain that interconnects his seeing, hearing, motor, and memory functions all together. So to try to figure out why does a cabbie driver have more gray matter than a bus driver, we figured out that a cabbie driver had more freedom and had no rules, and he had more freedom in his decision to pick his route and to going places. Whereas the bus driver had a predefined route he had to do every day constantly and repeating it over and over. And so the freedom to do more what you wanted to allowed him to be more creative about his work. And so the more creative he was, the larger the gray matter increased, the more it increased in his brain. The more it increases, the more gray matter you have, the stronger the connections between all those functions like seeing, hearing, remembering increase. They get stronger, and you're able to use them more faster and more better than if you had them before as a bus driver. But how is this applied to education exactly? Well, the more gray matter a student has, the easier he's able to remember information that he is taught and apply it to his work. You know, actually, there's something interesting about the cabbie driver, actually. I got here late when I came here because I went to the wrong university. I got confused. So I was at the wrong university, and so I had to call a taxi to come pick me up and bring me here. And while he was taking me here, I was talking to him because he kept taking all these weird streets I've never heard of, never seen of at this part of town. And he said, I told him, why are you taking these streets? I've never seen them. Aren't you going to take longer? He says, no, I don't like using maps. I like doing it my own way. And I said, okay, as long as you get me there. And he actually got me here faster than I had thought of. I thought he was going to take longer by taking all these unknown streets. But he says he doesn't like doing what normal people do, but taking the known streets. He likes taking the little hidden paths and everything because it's faster and more better. And actually, when the cabbie driver does this, the more different things he does constantly every day, it challenges his brain to rewire itself, to adapt to various situations he encounters. So he's able to rethink his way through problems always. So basically, what we need to do exactly is to increase the gray matter of our students, and there are several ways that we can in doing so, but primarily we need to encourage them into being more open, more to express themselves more in their work, in their school. And it really all starts with the teacher exactly. The teacher needs to start encouraging his or her students to work more, to be open, more express themselves. But so when a teacher gives an assignment, then they give them more methods of doing it. If it's a paper, they give them more methods like presentations, PowerPoints, groups, and all that other stuff. But more importantly, they should allow more mistakes for the students to make. Although most teachers think that the more mistakes the student makes, he's not that smart. But it's actually the opposite. He just hasn't learned it very well. So the more mistakes the student makes, it's better because that way he can learn from them. The student and the teacher can work together on analyzing the errors he's made to improve on himself and increasing his own gray matter in his brain, increasing the power of his brain.
I'm going to conclude with a little story. There was a professor at a very famous university, and he was teaching philosophy to his students. And he gave them a prompt. He said, prove to me that the chair I'm sitting on does not exist. Of course, he read essays that were probably 5 pages long, 10, even 15. He was getting tired, but then he saw one particular paper that really inspired him. That's what he was looking for. He was looking for a creative student that would answer his question. And that was the highest grade he had ever given to a student, ever, since he became a professor. And interestingly enough, the essay was only 2 words long. There were, what? Chair. Thank you.